Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or your digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organization. Each and every episode, we sit down with leaders from various fields, just like you're grabbing a cup of coffee with them. We dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Well, as a leader, are there any attitudes that you struggle with that could possibly hold you back? Maybe if you're being really honest, you have some attitudes that are affecting your leadership, and then it just boils down in everything. Your communication, how you interact with your team, maybe even heads into your household as well. So how do you as a leader identify those? How do you move forward? How do you correct them? Because attitude is everything. And how can identifying maybe and addressing some of those hazardous attitudes, how will it transform your leadership and your personal life? Well, I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this podcast interview forever. Interviewing a friend, someone I've been getting to know better over the last year. Just absolutely amazed by how he communicates. Looking forward to reading his book. I haven't been able to read it yet, but I've heard absolutely great things. And so today we're talking with Ricky Brown, the author of Five Hazardous Attitudes, and we're going to talk about these mindsets, how these dangers can, potentially pose some problems for your leadership. What I love is Ricky's story is unbelievably deep, and so before I jump in and start telling all the different things that I think is amazing about it, I want to welcome Ricky to the podcast and let you share a little bit more of your story. So welcome, Ricky, to the Speak with People podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's a joy and honor to be here with you.
Absolutely. Well, hey, there's a lot to your story. There's a couple things I can't wait to ask you about, but I'd love for you to tell our listeners just a little bit more about you, what you do, where you're from, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, great. So I've been speaking 20 years, and have been in leadership for 20 years. I've been pretty much everything you can be inside of a church as a pastor, youth pastor, young adult pastor, executive pastor. But I've also been a commercial pilot and a flight instructor. And so really excited to have released a book based off of something that the FAA requires every pilot to know and understand before they can get their license, which is the Five Hazardous Attitudes. And I'd love to dive in more as to why they're so important and why does the FAA require pilots to know and understand these five hazardous attitudes before they can get their license. And so presently I am an author, speaker, leadership development coach, and I also still serve as a teaching pastor of a great church in North Atlanta.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And, hopefully this is okay to say. I can edit it out if it's not. But I love it. Like, as soon as we're done with this podcast, you're packing up and heading over to a pretty substantial movie studio in the country to do some training with some executive leaders. So I didn't know if you wanted me to share online.
No, that's
studio.
fine. Yeah.
But
yeah, please. The VP of HR at Tyler Perry Studios read the book, and when I was able to hop on a discovery call with her, everything that I wanted to tell her about the book as to why she should have me come and do leadership development at her organization, she beat me to the punch. Everything I was going to try to say, she said it before I could say it. And that was such an encouragement to me that I sort of kind of hit the bullseye with this book from a person who is the VP of HR at a company that has the world's attention, So,
wow.
So we did a talk centered around the hazardous attitude of resignation last month. And so they immediately asked me to come back every month for 6 months throughout the end of the year until December, doing leadership talks centered around overcoming the five hazardous attitudes.
Wow. That's just absolutely incredible. I got to ask you one more thing about your story, though. When did you know you wanted to fly? I mean, that's Boy, that's quite an accomplishment, and it's not something that you just, you order something, from Amazon. Like, it is a big deal.
Right.
And so, walk us through that journey.
Yeah. So, my earliest memories as a child, I was just fascinated with aviation and flying. And it was just a great dream that I had. And there's a guy in my church actually who told me that he was a pilot. And race and ethnicity and aviation have an interesting intersection
Mm,
because less than 1% of commercial pilots are African American.
wow.
So when he came up to me when I was a child and told me, "Hey, I'm a pilot," hear me. For those of you who can't see me, I am half African American and half Hispanic. Okay, half Puerto Rican. My mom is from San Juan, Puerto Rico. My dad is tall, dark, and handsome from Mississippi. Okay, when he came up to me and told me that he was a pilot, I didn't believe him because he was black. I said,
Wow.
"Hey man, we don't do that.
Wow.
we, we don't fly airplanes. What are you talking about? I've been on commercial flights. I haven't seen a black pilot on a movie or TV. What are you talking about?" And so he was a little offended, and my mom sort of kind of gave me one of those little slaps that you give your child in church. She said, "He is a pilot. Don't embarrass me." So he was furious. He said, "Oh no, bring him to the airport today at 2 o'clock." So we had some lunch and we went to the airport. We went up to the counter and we checked out this airplane at the airport. He was like a little member of a club there. We walked around the airplane and we did a pre-flight. We hopped in. We started taxiing. We went to the runway. He puts the power all the way forward. We leave the ground. I look out of my right over my right shoulder out of my window and I see our wheels are not on the ground. And I turned to my left and I literally slapped him in the arm and said, "Hey man, you're a pilot." And so that wasn't even the biggest thing that happened. Uh, we start flying, and then a couple minutes later, he says, "Okay, now take the controls. I want you to fly." And I'm like, "Are you crazy? I don't know how to fly." He says, "I'm going to tell you what to do." Show me the little airplane, a little attitude indicator. And he said, "This is nose up, this is nose down, left, right." He said, "You want to try to keep it in the middle." Then finally, he said, "Turn your wings to the left." Turn my wing to the left. And he said, "Now turn them to the right." And when I turned them to the right, I was flying over my middle school I had just graduated from. And it was
Wow.
over. It was over. From that day forward, I wanted to fly. And then there's another big aha moment I share sometimes about my first day of flight school. This school that's pretty impactful. But yeah, yeah, you'll never regret becoming a pilot. It's one of the greatest things that a person can do, and it's super rewarding.
Wow. Just out of curiosity, what's the furthest distance you've flown?
Myself, when I was flying a private jet for a company out of Chicago, yeah, we did New York to LA.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, we did New York to LA.
That's incredible. Wow. Okay, so walk us through the book then, because you talked about how your some of your pilot stuff helped inspire where the book came for leaders, and so I'd love to kind of drill down into that.
Yeah, so the FAA requires every pilot to know and understand these five hazardous attitudes because they can and will arise or surface in the flight environment. Okay,
Mm.
so the five hazardous attitudes are anti authority, which says you can't tell me what to do. Okay, unfortunately, you can go on YouTube right now and hear pilots arguing with air
Oof.
traffic control over the instructions that they have been given because they don't like them. Here's the issue with that. Control is literally their last name. Their job is to control the traffic in the air. Okay. You
Right.
should not argue with air traffic control. All right. The next one is invulnerability, which simply says that consequences happen, but they won't happen to me, and it
Mm.
causes people to take actions that are just not good. Okay. Next one is macho. It's a overinflated sense of self-ability. It causes people to take unnecessary risks. Then next one is impulsivity. Causes people to act before they think. It says just do something and do it fast.
Wow.
And then finally, resignation. It's the hazardous attitude that causes people to feel as though they can't make a difference. And it causes them to say, what's the use? And the good news is that each of these hazardous attitudes has a corresponding antidote. Now,
Mm.
here's what's important with this. Aircraft accident investigators have found that at least one of these five hazardous attitudes has been involved in almost 80% of the plane crashes.
Wow.
So it's only logical to think that if a hazardous attitude can crash a plane, a hazardous attitude can crash a career, a
Wow.
business, a relationship, a ministry. So I wrote this book because pilots aren't the only people who sometimes crash.
Wow. Well, I got to respond in a couple of ways because one, you just gave us a master class on a one-liner. You know, entrepreneurs,
Mm,
business leaders, speakers, authors, we talk about this all the time. Like, how do you get right to the problem you solve for your target audience? Oh my goodness. Like, you just walked us through a master class on giving a one-liner. So thank you for that. Like, that
thank
is
you.
powerful. But then just even the clarity of it. Ooh, I'm already thinking through the experiences and the seasons I've been in where I'm going, yeah, anti-authority. Gosh, it's my 20s, you know, like
Yeah,
holy
yeah,
cow.
yeah.
The Macho. I'm like, yep, been there. Like, goodness
Hmm.
gracious. That is
Yes, yes.
that is some powerful stuff. Is there one for you that as you wrote this book, kind of hit you the hardest as, maybe you struggle with it, maybe kind of a vulnerable question, but didn't know if any of them you were like, oof, as I wrote this, wow, this
Yeah.
one really, really rang true.
I would say that I'm giving a talk this morning here in a little bit at Tyler Perry Studios, and we're going to talk about impulsivity. Now, here's the problem with impulsivity. Um, Impulsivity has a first cousin. They look a lot alike called agility.
Mm,
So don't hear me say that organizations and leaders don't have to be agile.
right.
Okay. Here's how you know whether or not this is agility or impulsivity. The fruit of agility and the fruit of impulsivity taste very different.
Oof.
Okay. The fruit of agility is sweet because what it allows us to do as leaders in organizations is it allows us to maximize our revenue, our profits, and it also allows us to not just avoid getting behind, but it allows us to also even lead and be a trendsetter. And
Mm,
that's where you want to be.
right.
I mean, so for those of you, I don't know how, if you pay attention to the stock market, I knew about Nvidia when it was $100 the first time, not after the split, and I didn't buy it. Okay. So if you're unaware of what happened with the market, Nvidia it has a great place in the AI world. I remember when the stock was $100, it went all the way to 1600.
Phew.
Then it split, and now it's like 129 as I checked this morning when I got up. Now, I did buy it when it was, when it before it split, so that was good on my part. Whatever. But my point is, agility allows us to be a trendsetter and get ahead of things.
Yeah.
Now, impulsivity, the fruit of that is bitter because we're filled with regret and we're filled with the consequences of not thinking before we act.
Mm,
So, as a person who is not risk averse, a person who tries to have agile leadership, I have to be careful. Am I displaying agility or am I displaying impulsivity? Because sometimes you don't know the difference until the outcome.
wow. Wow. This is powerful. One of the things I'm thinking about, we talk a lot about in this podcast, as a leader, your communication is going to be either healthy or unhealthy. And it so much
Mm-hmm.
depends on the health of your inner world. And these attitudes, I mean, as I start to, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking through those, I'm like, wow, definitely the seasons as a leader where I've struggled with some of these hazardous attitudes. Wow, my communication just mirrors it. I mean, just, thinking about, the attitude of resignation for a second. Those seasons where
Yeah.
we just speak quitting all the time. Well, I can't do that.
Yes.
I won't be able to do that. I could never try that. I mean, just incredibly powerful. Could you kind of give us a little bit more on that attitude specifically, resignation, and maybe
Yes.
that antidote?
Yes, and it'll definitely lead into the antidote. This is a little tongue in cheek. I hope it's not offensive. I heard someone say that if you didn't wrestle with mental health during the pandemic, you were crazy before it started.
Wow. Yeah.
The pandemic was rough.
Yeah.
It was rough because if you lived in a more um, a politically different state, I'll leave it like that. Some of the requirements was so strict. So I'll
Yep.
just give you a prime example. I'm from Mississippi, but I was living in Chicago during the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
And in Chicago, they didn't play. They were so serious. It was
Yep.
like 2 years. We were told to go to timeout in the corner, and nobody told us for how long.
Right.
Psychologically, that makes you want to resign. It makes you want to quit. It's like, how long are we going to be in the corner in
Yep.
timeout?
Yep.
Like, tell me what the sentence is so I can at least mentally prepare for this. And then during the summer, I went home to visit my folks in Mississippi, and Mississippi was like, pandemic what? that's gone. That's over. We don't that's old news. What are you talking about? So with that being said, during the pandemic, I really, man, I'm telling you, that was hard. That was hard leading people through that because you're dealing with your own emotional and mental um issues
Yep.
dealing with the pandemic, but you're also trying to usher other people through it. Now, you mentioned the antidote. Here's why this is super important. The antidote to all of the five hazardous attitudes is actually using your words because our words can frame our world. Psychologists have proven this over and over again. So I'll just walk through all of these very briefly. The antidote to anti-authority, and listen, this is published in the FAA's Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. So
Wow.
think about this, okay? The antidote to anti-authority is follow the rules. They're usually right. So it's the antidote is to actually say out loud and use your words to say, follow the rules. They're usually right. Invulnerability, the antidote is it could happen to me because the
Mm.
hazardous attitude of invulnerability says it won't happen to me.
Right.
Macho, the antidote is to actually say out loud, use your words, and say, taking unnecessary risks is foolish. The antidote to impulsivity is to actually say out loud and use your words to say, not so fast, think first. Finally,
Wow.
the antidote to resignation is to actually say out loud and use your words to say, I can make a difference. Now, here's my big question. If the FAA understands the power of our words,
Wow.
why don't we?
Right.
Words are powerful. Would speak to people, speak with people. I'm sure that teach your folks how to summon words and send them into battle.
Mm.
One of the most powerful things that we have is our words because our words have the ability to frame our world.
Wow. Wow. Just incredible. Well, and I even love it from a faith perspective. God, the creator of the universe. I mean, he chose words to create everything, and in each of us, our words create worlds. Like you just talked about it, frames our worlds. I mean, it's just amazing, and yet, I even think about my dad. My dad is a hero of mine. Grew up with a mom who always told him, "Hey, you're a rates. You're never going to amount to much." And so I think about that, like, I can't imagine having that kind of childhood where you just constantly have that flow of words of, how could it not build the resignation attitude? And somehow by the grace of God, he broke free from those. But it's just amazing. Sometimes
Yeah.
we we as we look at our words, we
Hmm.
put barely any thought behind them, and
Yeah.
yet they are so incredibly
So
powerful.
powerful.
So
So
powerful.
here's something that's very important to mention to the audience. One is a hazardous attitude, by definition, is not just an emotion.
Mm,
It's not how we emote. It is an actual behavioral response. It's very important. It is a behavior.
yep.
So what we have to understand and realize, as I interviewed several psychologists to prepare to write this book, what they shared with me was hazardous attitudes are most often due to unresolved trauma.
Wow.
Okay, so unresolved trauma a lot of times is the trigger. It's the underlying cause to a hazardous attitude.
Yep.
And an attitude is not just how we emote. It's not just our emotions. It's a behavioral response.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. So as leaders, what should our response be specifically if we don't see it? We're
Yeah,
just like, my attitude's fine. And then we're approached,
yeah,
by either a supervisor or someone close
yeah.
to us. How do we, so often I find myself in years past with my pride going, what are
Hmm.
they talking about? Like, this is
Yeah,
ridiculous. What should be a healthy leader's response if we're called out on one of these attitudes or it's kind of brought to our attention?
yeah. Self awareness is a journey and a process that is worth the trip.
Mm,
And it may sound cliche, but we hurt in isolation and we heal in community.
wow.
The process of self-awareness is not a solo pursuit. You need those people around you who can call you out, who can share with you how, look, hey, Jason, this is how we have experienced you.
Yep.
Feedback is a priceless gift.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we've got to be able to understand that when a person has a hazardous attitude, oftentimes the last person to know is the person with the hazardous attitude.
Right.
So, uh, you know, it's that's why I recommend. So the book, you go through each of the five hazardous attitudes. If you like story, these are five compelling fables with the truth at the end. Okay, it's packed full, and every single story is original to each of the hazardous attitudes. Then at the end of each chapter, there is what I call attitude adjustments,
Mm,
where we drill down and just look at the characters a little closely, because the point of this whole thing is that uh, we can learn costly lessons from the characters without having to pay for them ourselves. Okay,
wow.
that's the whole point. And then finally, in chapter 6, we give what I call a toolbox, where we show you certain things and certain tools and tricks that you can use in order to improve. But this book is just an invaluable resource if you read it in a group, because we have to be able to heal in community, because
Right.
all we do in isolation is hurt. There's another African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I really
Wow.
believe that that's true.
Wow. Right. Because those crashes are so incredibly painful. I didn't know
Hmm.
if you've had one in your life or just the thought of them, you know, was able to push you to help people kind of miss some of them in their life.
So I'll share two things, right? One, I had my leadership journey starts with being a pastor. Yours, maybe you may be a business owner, an entrepreneur, and all of that is great. But it's really all leadership. It's really all leadership.
Yep.
And I was fortunate enough to be a part of a leadership cohort where myself and five other pastors traveled to be in-person meetings for 3 days every other week for 7 months.
Wow.
So that means that we were together 6 days in person a month for 7 months. And this was a self awareness journey. And one of the things that we did in this cohort is we studied the lives of leaders who had had a great public fall.
Wow.
Okay. But watch this. Some of our workshop instructors were those leaders.
Whew.
And they came, they got on a plane, and they flew to meet with us in a room. And they said, I destroyed my ministry and my life, and here's how I did it.
Wow.
And I began to see this reoccurring theme of hazardous attitudes. So this thing has been jumping out in my life for years.
Yep.
And I've seen it over and over again. Now, I'll tell you something that's a little bit more sobering. Many of you out there, you've got at least one book inside of you. And you've been saying, I'm going to write this book. I'm going to work on it. And you start it and you open a laptop and then you close it and don't open it again for 3-4 months. Well, here's what happened to me. I was writing the book, but I wasn't, when I finished it, Jason, I had an alarm on my phone. So 7 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. I wrote, and then that alarm went back off at 7 p.m. and 7 p.m. To 8:39 p.m. I wrote. Okay, every single day. And that's when I finished the book. Here's what happened to cause me to set a schedule. I knew a person who was a leader of a large organization. He was a father. He had 5 children, and he was a pilot. And unfortunately, a hazardous attitude cost him his life because when I read his NTSB report, he had several opportunities to decide, I'm not going to do this. But he had some pressure and a reason why he was trying to get from one place to another. So when he died, I thought, oh my God, I am not as committed to writing this book as I should be. I have not set an alarm and really set a schedule to finish. And this book could potentially save a person's life. And so that was the big shot in the arm I needed to really get busy and to finish the book.
Wow. Well, it's almost like you're speaking right to me because I'm about 60% done with mine, and I need to be done because it's all there, it's developed, and it needs to be finished. But I've let some of these attitudes stop me. So
let me tell you, man,
I appreciate that.
I got the honor to meet Rick Warren, and he took me inside of the room where he wrote The Purpose-Driven Life. Okay? Now, if I'm correct, the only Christian book that has sold more than The Purpose-Driven Life is the Bible.
Right.
Okay. Now, here's what he did. He had a schedule.
Yeah.
He had a schedule. If you're out there and you're supposed to be speaking, you're supposed to be, again, I know everyone is not involved in ministry, or very few may be, but Haddon Robinson is a person that teaches communication from a preaching standpoint. And he says that if you cannot write a talk, it's impossible that you could give one.
Right.
Focusing on your writing will absolutely improve and strengthen your speaking. And so setting that alarm on that iPhone, or God forbid if you got an Android, just kidding.
That's right.
Because we're apostolic over here. That'll make all the world a difference. That one little thing. Set a schedule, set an alarm. When that thing goes off, don't you be afraid of that blank page. Write your name if you can't write anything else.
Yep.
And that'll get the fear of that blank page away, and write. And as you write, it will improve your speaking.
Yeah. Ooh, that's powerful. That is powerful. And much needed. Absolutely love that. That's fantastic. And so with your book, you also have an assessment with it as well, right?
Yes. So we have, there's the book, there's a study guide, which is also a book as well. It's on Amazon as well. And then we just created an online assessment that a leading psychometrician helped me create. That sounds like a big word. It just means psychological metrics. It's a person who understands that. And this assessment will assess a person's susceptibility to each of the five hazardous attitudes. But it won't just point out where you're deficient. It will give you helpful insight as to how to overcome what you need to do in order to overcome
Wow.
the areas where you need improvement. So we're really excited about that. And it's still a little beta, but we'll be releasing it soon.
Wow. That's incredible. And the study guide sounds like that'd be perfect actually for teams to go through.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. You can go through it as a team, and the study guide will be a huge benefit to you.
I love that. What I love about resources like you created is when I led, teams, and I've had teams of, just a few to, 30, 40 people. These kind of
Hmm.
resources are incredible because, some leaders want to create everything on their own. That's great, but why not tap into an incredible resource that's already created, and then your team can go through it. I love that type of learning. And what you said earlier about community, oh my goodness, when we grow in community, when we experience those things, that's just absolutely powerful to be able to do
Hmm.
that.
It is. And so, as a leader, you never want you to be the lid of your organization.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
if everything has to flow through you, good leaders, you got to learn how to decentralize you. And once you're able to do that, your organization can experience growth and prosperity. People are empowered because they're able to use their gifts and talents and maximize their potential, and everyone wins.
Wow. I love that. What's interesting is it's not often, we've interviewed lots of authors, speakers, professors, CEOs. But what I love about this interview is you're actually heading out soon to go deliver. I'm just always curious as I talk with other speakers. Do you have a, pre-ritual before you, lead a presentation or, deliver a
Yeah,
keynote? Is there, some type of habits that you have? You read about athletes and they,
yeah,
you know, they listen to the same thing, they sit the same way, they wear the same thing. I'm just
yeah.
curious about your speaking, your presentation. Do you have any of those kind of habits or pre-ritual?
Yeah, so two big things. One is music, helps me get into the right mindset. The other is just sort of kind of, if you think about an airplane and a holding pattern, it's literally flying in a circle. And I just sort of kind of put myself mentally and spiritually and emotionally in a holding pattern of God's approval.
Mm.
It's important for me to just meditate and rehearse that I am already approved. I'm
Wow.
already accepted. I'm already affirmed. I'm not going here in just a little bit to Tyler Perry Studios to perform for approval. I'm already approved because I am using the talents and gifts that God has given me to improve the lives of other people, and I'm giving it the best that I have, and I am already approved. I'm
Oh,
not
I love
working
that.
for approval. I'm working from approval. And then last thing, man, this guy, this is very recent. Eric Thomas, man, if he doesn't get you fired up and ready to run through a brick wall, I don't know what will, man. That dude is just, if I could bottle up whatever he's on and shoot it in my veins.
Yes, yes.
Golly, man. I love it. I love it because at the end of the day, I'm a passionate person, right? And it lets me know that, man, you can be yourself.
Yes,
You can be who you are. All speakers are not the same.
yes.
If you use comical thrusts well in your presentation and use comical thrusts to move the presentation along, if you speak and you have clever turns of phrase and alliterations that make it memorable
Yep,
and appetizing and interesting, then do that. And if you're passionate, and you sound like you need an anger translator, as long as you're substantive, then do that. Whatever
that's
you
right.
do, be yourself and communicate the way that you feel most equipped to do, because that's the way that people are going to receive you, as authentic
Yep.
and memorable. Now, to be honest with you, and if this goes against anything you teach, Jason, forgive me. For me, the cardinal sin of communication is being forgettable.
Oof. Wow.
To me, that's the worst thing that I can do. Because if it's forgettable, then why are you saying it?
That's right. That's right.
For me,
Oof.
that's the worst thing.
I love that.
Whatever I do, you're gonna remember it.
That's right.
I'm gonna find a way to say something in a way that sticks, in a way that makes it memorable.
That's right.
If I, you know what? I'm glad you mentioned that, because this is a Speak with People podcast. That pilots aren't the only people who sometimes crash. That took hours for me to come up with that.
That's right.
That took hours and hours and hours. Whenever I speak on Sunday, my big goal is, what's my message in a sentence? If
That's
I
right.
can't say it in one sentence, I can't say it in 100 sentences.
That's right. I love that. I
What
love
are
that.
you saying? What are you saying? Can you say it in a sentence?
Yeah.
You know, my I help statement is, I help people avoid unnecessary crashes in life by overcoming hazardous attitudes.
That's right.
And it takes hard work, but one of the biggest keys to making sure that what you share is not forgettable is being able to say it in a sentence.
Mm. I love that. Let me ask you a couple of real quick rapid fire questions. You
Yeah.
mentioned Eric as a speaker. Is there a podcast that you keep going back to that you would recommend to our listeners if you're a podcast listener?
Yeah, we don't want to be broke speakers, right? So this has nothing to do with speaking, but Market Mondays, these guys are killing it investment wise and stuff like
Yes.
that. It's amazing. I love Market Mondays. All right, so Maxwell Leadership Podcast, he's not even on there. It's just leaders chopping it up. Carrie Newhoff, of course. Craig Groeschel, maybe the
Yes.
best leadership podcast that I've heard. I just love Craig Groeschel. Then finally, for the entrepreneurs out there, how I built this.
Ooh. Yes.
Amazing. Everything from Southwest Airlines to Spanx, founder here
Yep.
in Atlanta.
Yep.
Just all kind of stuff. And here's another example why words are so powerful. Here's the underlying theme to every single one of these entrepreneur story and how I built this. Someone in their life used their words to tell them that they weren't going to succeed.
Wow.
I noticed that in every single episode, they dealt with voices. Someone told them, that's too crazy. That's too much. That's too radical. You won't succeed.
Yep.
That won't work. So speak with people in a way to build them up and not tear them down.
I love that. I love it. And then lastly, is there a book? Is there, a leader that's, you've got to read this before you read any other book. It's got to be there.
Oh man, you're putting me on. You know what? I'm gonna give a shout out to a young lady here in Atlanta. I know her and her husband. If you are in the speaking business, uh, the book by Ashley Kirkwood, "Speak Your Way to Cash,"
Mm.
is so good. She probably shouldn't have written it. It's that good. She's a lawyer by trade and runs a seven-figure business now.
Wow.
Speak seven-figure, business helping speakers. And the book is so thorough, it reads like it's written by a lawyer, and it just walks you through everything you need to do to build a thriving speaking business.
Wow. Wow. I might just put it on my tab because I'm going to order that right away. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Where can we send our listeners, find out more about you, your book, so they can get it and all that kind of stuff?
It's my social media handle with LinkedIn, and actually LinkedIn may not work, but Instagram is all things Ricky B, RICKYB, letter B. That's Instagram and so many others. And then also architectyouratitude.com is my site, and so you can go there and learn more about it there and grab the book. If you grab it on Architect Your Attitude, you will help me raise my 10-month-old daughter. If you buy it on Amazon, I'm not mad, but you're just making Bezos richer because he takes all of our poor authors' money. So,
Right.
but
Right.
hey, I get it. It's cheaper on Amazon. You don't pay the shipping. Fine. Go ahead and get it there. I would be so honored. And please, 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 please leave a review.
I love it. Ricky, this has been phenomenal. Appreciate it. You are an absolutely brilliant leader, and I just thank you enough for your humility and just sharing this. Cannot wait to tell the world more, our listeners more about you, and looking forward to connecting in person at some point.
All right. Absolutely, Jason. Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. Thank you for leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And thank you for every like and every comment. Every single time you cut and copy a link and send it to a coworker or a friend, it absolutely means the world, and it helps each other transform our communication skills. Lastly, don't forget about a great resource that's available to you, our communication skills library. At the end of every episode, we ask each guest their favorite speaker, their favorite podcast, their favorite book, and we've compiled all of those resources together to give you an amazing library to continue your growth and development. Thank you again for being a listener and for being a part of the Speak with People community.